and cooperating with each other globally and nationally across continents. And one of the great ideas that came out on the website, somebody said, well, why don't we think about the Fargo region as going from Winnipeg down to Sioux Falls? It's a kind of Red River region, which I thought was kind of an interesting idea. That maybe in fact your state is really these set of cities that share this waterway, as opposed to the state of North Dakota. That this new way of thinking about yourselves may in fact be a key to the way in which you are perceived globally, and think about yourselves and how you connect. You may have much more in common with Winnipeg and Sioux Falls than you do with Western North Dakota. So part of this is to rethink political boundaries. The question I had this morning on the AM radio DJ was to say that Minnesota has organized itself on dealing with water around watersheds, while I gather North Dakota still organizes itself on county lines around county water districts. And the point your DJ was saying is water doesn't sort of work that way. Water works by watersheds. And so I think we're in a period where we're going to need to rethink political boundaries and rethink who are we really connected to and have interests with. So at one level, I think Fargo is in itself, the center, Fargo-Moorhead is the center of your own region. At another level, I think you probably do share a lot with other cities up and down the Red River. And at another level, you are with us and Chicago in some sort of large region that includes Chicago and may go down to St. Louis, and is kind of a northern, midwestern center of the continent kind of region. And there may be different kinds of relationships we have across all those boundaries. But another principle, of course, as I've said, work with nature, work with your landscape rather than against it, and the idea of interconnected wetlands is a good example of that. Decentralized utilities, think about your infrastructure at neighborhood scales. And by the way, a lot of utilities are interested in this. They don't want to be building power plants anymore. And the more in which they can decentralize generation of power, what have you, the happier they are at. Utilize all the free energy around you. I mean, I could have shown wind turbines, but these are interesting, and I thought I'd show them to you. There's these new kind of hydro turbines that have been developed for rivers to generate power that are safe for fish, and they just are tethered to the bottom of rivers, and they just spin around 365 days a year generating power. I mention this because, again, the Red River, it is one of your greatest assets. It's certainly one of your greatest energy sources. So don't think about it as just the river. Start to think about these things in new ways. There is more power going up north on the Red River than you can imagine. And there are these new ways of utilizing it. And it's all free. These things are actually relatively cheap, and they pay for themselves pretty quickly. So start to utilize all that. And then we just end by this graph, which is a little confusing at first, so I'll just want to explain it to you. But it is why innovation is so important. Why, for example, one of your greatest assets is NDSU and the other colleges that you have here. Because this is some work that Jeffrey West at the Santa Fe Institute has done. And he has said that we're on a series of these exponential curves, which you can see number one, and I talked about those earlier in my talk, where we're on these 20th century bubbles that we can't sustain. And if we don't do anything about them, we're going to be where number two is, which means that we're going to have the kinds of collapses that we've started to see in housing prices. We saw, in my book, I talk about the investment banking collapse. We loaded so much debt on the investment banks that they eventually collapsed. We don't want to do 1 and 2 in this graph. What we want to do is number 3. We want to do this red line. And what number 3 is the line of innovation. And what it means is that we have to continue to innovate our way past the threats that threaten to bring us down. And the way you do that is you utilize all the intelligence in your community, not just your university, although your colleges and universities are great sort of condensers and gathering places for that, but everybody in this room, everybody on this website, everybody in this community has innovative ideas, have ideas, solutions, things that should be tried, piloted, and what have you. That is how communities will thrive, is to continually out-innovate the threats that are coming at us. And one of the things that Jeffrey West shows in this graph is you'll notice these kind of shaded bars, which is that the time frames for innovation keep getting shorter and shorter, which is that we don't have lots of time. We can't just sort of dream about, well, yeah, around 2030 maybe we'll get innovative. We have to start innovating now. And that means thinking outside the box about what we're doing, thinking in new ways about almost everything we do. And the kind of irony of this is that those communities that figure out how to become centers of innovation, places that tap the great ideas of their own people, will be the places that will thrive in the future. And they will also become the basis for how you brand yourself. I mean, one of the other things, maybe as a thought to leave you with, because I'd certainly like to hear your thoughts about all of this, is that we now are in this kind of weird sort of echo from the 20th century where we have two political parties. One is the party of big government, the other is the party of big business. And they are at loggerheads and at a stalemate. And that is so 20th century. They are so far behind both parties where we need to go. Because I would argue that the argument is not about should we have big government or big business. The argument is more of an issue of local and global. And the real question is that we know that the public and private and nonprofit sectors have got to work together. The more effectively they work together locally, the better they'll be. And yet every community also has to think about its global brand. And so one of the other parts of this for Fargo is not just thinking about how we can energize our population to try new innovative ideas, but then how do you want to be represented in the New York Times? I think you want to be perceived as different from what the Coen brothers presented you as. But I think that there's great potential there. I mean, and the other way in which my colleagues in New York and LA know about you is every year when the floods come. I would argue that don't walk away from those things. Utilize those things. Use that and turn those kinds of characteristics of Fargo to your advantage. Do something that just blows everybody else away. Be the city that is the first city to do X, whatever that is. In the Twin Cities, we have these energetic mayors, and they decided we were going to become the #1 bike city in the country. And they worked really hard. They went to Paris. They got this, bike sharing program going. And sure enough, last year, we found ourselves #1 bike city. We also found that we were the #1 health city. We had the healthiest urban population. Who would know? But what that is that becomes a brand of a city. And that gets on global news channels. And it begins to be something that you're proud of and you're identified with. And so part of this comp plan isn't just figuring out where you want to put transportation and housing and all that. It's to think about how you can take advantage of what Fargo is and brand yourselves in a way that you are known globally for being really great in what it is you do as you do that at a local level. So that local-global connection is really the new kind of debate that we need to have. How do local communities be as thriving and as healthy as possible, and how are they perceived and respected globally? And it's not about big government, big business, small government. It's about all of us figuring out how to work together to achieve that. So you've got a lot of great work going on. I've really enjoyed reading your website, and thank you for paying attention to these thoughts. So Thank you. I think we have time for questions, do we? Yes. Yeah. We want to grab the mic here. So. Okay.
Make sure this is on. Anybody got a question for Thomas Fisher? And a hand way up in the back.
No? Yeah.
He's thinking about it.
Thinking about it, huh?
Any questions?
Oh, there's a... Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Carlene.
I really like your comments on social capital and the concept that we should try to take advantage of the social capital that we mobilize during our flood effort and try and focus that on some things that could then drive the innovation and the other positive things that you discussed. You know, you cited Minneapolis as being the bike city. In your mind, what other good example could you give us of a city that has really taken this to the nth degree, or if there is one yet in our country?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, there are some cities that are, you know, kind of known. I mean, there's the obvious things of, you know, LA is a kind of media city and New York is the, you know, investment city. But, you know, in a way, I think that those are older ideas. I think this is really an opportunity for a city like Fargo, is that I don't think there are a lot of cities yet that are thinking about branding themselves in this way through what people do, as opposed to where they're already known for their economy. So, I mean, I think the interesting opportunity for Fargo is, I mean, you're going to always be relatively small, so you're not ever going to be the biggest of something in the economy, but you can do things that are kind of peculiar and interesting enough that everybody pays attention and is fascinated by. And so, you know, for example, with the AM DJ this morning, you know, I was saying that, you know, how can you solve the flooding problem, create a system of wetlands that might be the biggest in the world, turn it into a, you know, the biggest bird habitat in North America. You know, in other words, use a solution for one problem to solve multiple issues, and make it something that attracts people to come see. I had an artist come to my office a year or so ago, and he's actually proposed taking a strip right through the middle of the United States and returning a 100-mile wide strip to prairie and making it the next national park, because we no longer have prairie. And so I was thinking, as I was talking this morning to the DJ, is that, you know, could there be some things that Fargo does to solve one set of problems that has multiple other opportunities? But I don't know what that is. I didn't really come with answers, but my hunch is that cities that figure this out will be the ones that will do well in this new kind of networked world that we're in.
Could you talk a little bit about how you see art and